Hello, my dear viewers. Today will be a very interesting story. I recommend watching the video to the end. Put a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and be sure to write comments on what you liked or did not like, and if you have an interesting criminal story from your life. Write your story in the comments and I will make a video and tell your story here on the channel. Okay, I have detained you. I wish you a good mood and viewing. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Collins. I never thought my life would take the turn it has, but here I am telling this story. Maybe sharing it will help me figure out what to do next, or at least warn someone else not to ignore the red flags I missed. It started a few weeks ago on a quiet Saturday afternoon. My husband, Liam, had gone out to run errands, which was something he'd been doing a lot lately. I decided to use the time to do a deep clean of the house. You know, the kind of cleaning where you move furniture and empty drawers. When I got to his desk, I hesitated. Liam had always been private about his things, but it wasn't like I was snooping. I was just organizing. At least, that's what I told myself. As I emptied one of the drawers, I noticed a small envelope tucked beneath a stack of papers. Inside were wads of cash, hundreds of dollars, maybe more. My heart raced as I counted it, nearly $10,000 in total. Why would Liam have this much money hidden away? He never mentioned a bonus, and we didn't keep that kind of cash lying around. Questions swirled in my head. Was he saving for something? Was he in trouble? I put the envelope back where I found it, my hands trembling. I told myself there must be a reasonable explanation, but deep down I knew something wasn't right. That evening I tried to act normal as we ate dinner, but I couldn't stop glancing at Liam. He seemed completely at ease, scrolling through his phone and making small talk about his day. So I began cautiously, "How are things at work?" "Any exciting projects?" Liam looked up, his expression neutral. "Same old." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious," I said, forcing a smile. "You've been working late a lot?" He shrugged. "You know how it is. Deadlines." I nodded, pretending to accept his answer, but my mind was racing. If it wasn't work, then what was it, and why hadn't he told me about the money? Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the cash. Every time Liam left the house, I felt an annoying urge to check the drawer again. Finally, I gave in. The money was still there, but this time I noticed something else, a receipt from a high-end jewelry store. The date was recent, but there was no mention of jewelry in our conversations, no new gift to explain the purchase. I sat on the floor, staring at the receipt, my stomach twisting into knots. Had Liam bought something for someone else? Feeling overwhelmed, I called my best friend, Emily. She was the kind of person who always seemed to know what to do. "I found money," I blurted out as soon as she answered. "What do you mean, you found money?" she asked, confused. "Liam has nearly $10,000 hidden in his desk. And there's a receipt for jewelry I've never seen." Emily was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, are you saying you think he's cheating?" The word hit me like a punch to the gut. "I don't know," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't want to think that, but what other explanation is there?" "You need more information," Emily said firmly. "Don't jump to conclusions yet. Just keep your eyes open." That evening, Liam's phone rang while he was in the shower. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but this time something made me glance at the screen. The name Amanda appeared. My heart sank. I didn't recognize the name, and Liam had never mentioned anyone by that name before. When he came back, I asked casually, "Who's Amanda?" Liam froze for the briefest moment before laughing. "Oh, just someone from work. She called about a project." The explanation seemed harmless enough, but his hesitation made my doubts grow. The next day, I decided to take Emily's advice and dig deeper. I started by looking through Liam's credit card statements. Most of the charges were normal groceries, gas, the occasional restaurant, but one stood out, a charge for a hotel room 3 weeks ago. We hadn't stayed at a hotel recently. My hands shook as I wrote down the date and location. Was this where he'd gone during one of his late errand runs? I couldn't stop staring at the hotel charge on Liam's credit card statement. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Why would he book a hotel room, and why hadn't he told me about it? I decided to confront him carefully. That evening, as we sat in the living room, I casually brought up the topic. "Liam," I began, keeping my tone light, "I was thinking we should take a weekend trip soon. It's been a while since we stayed at a hotel, hasn't it?" He glanced at me over his phone, his expression unreadable. "Yeah, it has. That sounds nice." I pushed a little further. "Do you ever stay at hotels for work?" His eyes narrowed slightly, and I could see the gears turning in his head. "Sometimes, if I'm traveling." "Why?" "Just curious," I said with a forced smile. He nodded, returning his attention to his phone. But I noticed something. He seemed tense, his jaw tight. Was it because of my question, or was I imagining things? The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to see the hotel for myself. I found the address from the credit card statement and decided to drive there. It was a sleek, modern building downtown, the kind of place Liam and I would never stay at. Too expensive, too flashy. As I sat in my car, staring at the entrance, I felt a wave of doubt. What was I even hoping to find? I gathered my courage and walked into the lobby. The air smelled like fresh flowers and polished wood, and a friendly-looking receptionist greeted me from behind the counter. "Hi," I said, forcing a smile. "I was wondering if you could help me. My husband stayed here a few weeks ago, and I wanted to check if he left anything behind." The receptionist frowned slightly. "Do you have his name and the dates of his stay?" I provided the information, my heart pounding. She tapped on her keyboard for a few moments before looking up. "Yes, Mr. Collins checked in on the 12th. He stayed for 1 night. But I'm not seeing any items left behind." "Was he alone?" I asked before I could stop myself. The receptionist hesitated, her smile faltering. "I'm sorry, Mum, but I can't share that information." Her response was enough to confirm my worst fears. I left the hotel feeling sick to my stomach. I didn't know what to do or where to turn, so I called Emily again. I went to the hotel, I told her as I paced in my living room. "He stayed there. I'm sure he wasn't alone." Emily was quiet for a moment. "You need proof, Sarah. If he's cheating, you need to catch him in the act. Otherwise, he'll just deny it." The idea made my skin crawl, but Emily was right. I couldn't confront Liam without solid evidence. That evening, I noticed something odd. Liam had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he went to take a call in the other room. It was rare for him to leave it unattended. The screen lit up with a notification, a text from Amanda. "Can't wait to see you again. Same time next week." My blood ran cold. I snapped a photo of the text with my phone just before Liam returned. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He glanced at his phone and shrugged. "Just work stuff." I nodded, pretending to believe him. But I knew now that Amanda wasn't just a co-worker. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the text, the hotel receipt, the stash of cash in Liam's desk. By the time morning came, I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. When Liam came down for breakfast, I was waiting for him, the photo of Amanda's text pulled up on my phone. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice trembling. Liam froze mid-step, his face paling. "What are you talking about?" I held up my phone. "Amanda. The one who can't wait to see you again. Who is she?" "Liam." For a moment, he just stared at me, his expression a mix of shock and anger. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She's no one, Sarah. Just a friend you're hiding cash for. A friend you book hotel rooms for." I shot back, my voice rising. Liam's jaw clenched. "You've been going through my things." "You lied to me," I yelled, my composure breaking. "You've been lying for months, Liam. How could you do this to me?" He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his coat and walked out the door, slamming it behind him. The sound of the door slamming echoed in my ears long after Liam left. I sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the text on my phone. My chest felt hollow, and my mind was a storm of anger, heartbreak, and confusion. How had it come to this? I knew I couldn't just sit there waiting for him to return. I had to act. I grabbed my car keys and drove to Emily's house. She opened the door, took one look at my tear-streaked face, and pulled me into a hug. "What happened?" she asked as she led me to the couch. I recounted everything: the text, the confrontation, and Liam storming out. Emily listened quietly, her expression hardening as I spoke. "You need to figure out how deep this goes," she said when I finished. "If he's hiding money, there could be more you don't know about." Her words sent a chill through me. More secrets. I didn't want to believe it, but at this point I couldn't ignore the possibility. The next day, I decided to search the house more thoroughly. If Liam was hiding cash, there might be other stashes or other clues he thought I wouldn't find. I started in his home office, going through every drawer and file cabinet. Most of it was routine paperwork, but tucked to the back of one drawer, I found a second envelope. This one didn't contain cash. Instead, it held receipts for expensive dinners, spa visits, and even a weekend retreat at a luxury resort. The dates on the receipts lined up with the times Liam had claimed to be working late or out of town for business. My stomach twisted as I realized just how much effort he had put into keeping his double life hidden. Among the receipts was something else, a handwritten note on hotel stationery. It read, "Can't wait for our next escape. Love, Amanda." The sight of her name made my blood boil. I snapped photos of everything with my phone, creating a digital record of the evidence. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to find them. The receipts included the name of Amanda's workplace, a boutique a few towns over. I drove there, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. When I arrived, I spotted her immediately, a tall, blonde woman chatting with a customer. She was stunning, and I hated her instantly. When the customer left, I walked up to the counter. "Are you Amanda?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. She looked surprised. "Yes. Can I help you?" "I'm Sarah," I said, my voice sharp. "Liam's wife." Her eyes widened, and for a moment she looked genuinely shocked. But then her expression turned defensive. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb," I snapped, pulling out my phone and showing her a photo of the text she'd sent. "I know about the money. I know about the hotels." "How long has this been going on?" Amanda's face flushed, and she glanced around nervously. "Look, I didn't know he was married, okay?" "He told me he was divorced." Her words stung, but I pressed on. "And the money, did he use it for you?" She hesitated, then nodded. "He said it was part of his savings." He's been paying for everything, trips, gifts, even my rent. I felt sick. Not only had Liam betrayed me, but he'd been using our hard-earned money to finance his affair. That night, I called a divorce lawyer. I didn't know what my next steps would be, but I needed to know my rights. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named CRIFAN, listened carefully as I explained the situation. "You've done the right thing by gathering evidence," she said, "but you need to be careful. If he realizes you're building a case against him, he might try to hide assets or manipulate the situation." "What can I do?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed. CRIFAN outlined a plan: secure my finances, document everything, and avoid direct confrontation until I was ready to file. Her advice gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in weeks. Over the next few weeks, I followed CRIFAN's advice to the letter. I opened a separate bank account, moved my paycheck there, and began quietly preparing for a divorce. Meanwhile, Liam continued to act as if nothing had changed. He apologized for storming out and claimed he was stressed from work, but I didn't buy it. I played along, pretending to accept his excuses while building my case. The day I finally filed for divorce, I felt a mix of fear and relief. I handed Liam the papers during dinner, watching as his face turned pale. "What is this?" he asked, his voice shaking. "It's over, Liam," I said firmly. "I know about Amanda. I know about the money. And I know about the lies." He tried to deny it at first, then shifted to anger, accusing me of being paranoid and ungrateful, but his words didn't matter anymore. I was done letting him control me. In the months that followed, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. It wasn't easy, but I found strength I didn't know I had, and as for Liam, he lost everything: his mistress, his money, and his reputation. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: trust your instincts. If something feels off, don't ignore it. The truth might be painful, but it's better than living a lie. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. This will help me work better and faster for you. I would be grateful, so watch my other videos. Hello, my dear viewers. Today will be a very interesting story. I recommend watching the video to the end. Put a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and be sure to write comments on what you liked or did not like, and if you have an interesting criminal story from your life. Write your story in the comments and I will make a video and tell your story here on the channel. Okay, I have detained you. I wish you a good mood and viewing. I'm not sure how long I have to tell this story, but if you're listening, pay attention. My name is Claire Thompson, and if you're watching this, it means I didn't make it out. The night it all began was ordinary, or so I thought. It was a Thursday evening, and I'd just wrapped up dinner with some friends at a cozy little restaurant on the outskirts of Portland. The drive home was quiet, my favorite playlist humming softly in the background. The streets were nearly empty, and the moon was the only companion in the sky. Then it happened. A sudden jolt, a car slammed into me from behind. My heart raced as I pulled over, fumbling for my phone. I was shaken but unhurt. The other car had stopped, its headlights glaring into my rearview mirror. I stepped out cautiously, ready to exchange insurance details, but something felt off. The driver didn't approach. Instead, two men emerged from the shadows, their faces obscured by hats pulled low. One of them had a crowbar, the other a rope. I didn't even have time to scream. One of them grabbed me, his gloved hand clamping over my mouth, while the other wrestled me to the ground. My phone clattered to the pavement, its screen shattering like my chances of escape. Before I knew it, I was dragged into their car. My wrists were bound with duct tape, and my pleas muffled by a gag. I thrashed and fought, but they were too strong. The car sped off into the night, leaving my own vehicle abandoned on the roadside. The only thing I could think of was the dark stretch of forest we were heading toward, its towering trees looming closer with every mile. The car screeched to a halt on a dirt road surrounded by nothing but trees and darkness. My heart pounded as one of the men yanked me out, the forest air cold against my skin. The taller of the two, with a deep scar running across his cheek, glared at me like I was nothing more than a problem to be solved. "She's seen our faces," he growled. "We do it here, quick." The other man hesitated. "Shouldn't we make sure no one's nearby first?" "We can't leave anything behind." They started arguing, their voices rising above the rustling leaves. I realized this might be my only chance. My hands were still tied, but my legs were free. I felt the adrenaline surge through me, silencing my fear. When Scarface turned his back, I ran. Branches scratched at my face, and the uneven ground threatened to trip me, but I didn't stop. I could hear their shouts behind me, their footsteps crashing through the underbrush. My breath came in gasps as I pushed deeper into the woods, the darkness swallowing me whole. I didn't know where I was going, but anywhere was better than where I'd been. After what felt like forever, I found a fallen tree to hide behind. I crouched low, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they'd hear it. Their voices grew faint, then disappeared entirely. For a moment, I thought I was safe, but then I realized I had no idea how to get out. The forest was a labyrinth, and I was utterly lost. The silence was suffocating. My breath echoed in my ears as I peeked over the fallen tree, no sign of them. Just darkness and the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. I wanted to cry, but there was no time for that. I needed to move. My wrists were raw from pulling at the duct tape, but I refused to stop trying. As I stumbled through the dense forest, the terrain grew rougher. Twigs snapped under my feet, and roots reached out like skeletal fingers, threatening to trip me with every step. Then I heard a howl. My stomach twisted. Wolves, coyotes. I wasn't sure, but the thought of being hunted again sent a chill through me. I trudged on, my legs aching and my throat parched. The forest was endless, an oppressive wall of trees that blocked out any hint of direction. Panic bubbled in my chest as I realized I hadn't heard the men in hours. That should have been a relief, but it wasn't, because now I wasn't sure which was worse, them or the forest itself. The ground beneath me grew soft, almost spongy, the reek of damp earth and decay. I stumbled into a clearing, illuminated by slivers of moonlight. For a moment, I thought I saw something move in the shadows, something massive. My breath caught. I froze, waiting, listening. But it was gone, if it had ever been there at all. I pressed forward, my steps cautious, the eerie silence thickening around me. That's when I noticed the first sign that I wasn't alone anymore, a large paw print in the mud. Too big to be a dog, too fresh to be abandoned. I swallowed hard, my body trembling. Whatever made that print was still out there, and it was close. I stared at the paw print, willing it to be an illusion. But the deep grooves in the mud told a different story. It wasn't just fresh, it was massive. My pulse raced as the realization hit. I wasn't alone. The forest, once silent, came alive with strange sounds. The crunch of leaves, the snap of a twig, a low, guttural noise I couldn't place. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't tell which direction was safe. Then I saw it. In the pale moonlight, a shadow moved between the trees, large and lumbering, its bulk shifting with a terrifying grace. My mind raced, trying to process what I was seeing. A bear. A massive one. It hadn't seen me yet, but that didn't matter. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure it could hear it. I ducked low, praying the shadows would hide me. The bear sniffed the air, its head turning slowly. It knew I was here. I backed away as quietly as I could, each step feeling like a gamble. My foot landed on a branch, and the sharp crack echoed like a gunshot. The bear's head snapped in my direction, its dark eyes locking onto me. I bolted. The forest blurred around me as I sprinted, adrenaline pushing me past the pain in my legs. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see how close it was. But I could hear branches snapping, heavy paws pounding the earth. It was chasing me. The uneven terrain betrayed me, and I tripped, falling hard onto the ground. My hands were still bound, making it impossible to catch myself. Pain shot through my side as I rolled onto my back, gasping for air. The bear emerged from the shadows, its enormous form towering over me. Its breath was hot and heavy, its teeth gleaming in the dim light. I scrambled to my feet and ran again, desperation fueling my every move. But deep down, I knew the truth. I couldn't outrun it. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like they would give out at any moment. The forest was alive with the sound of the bear crashing through the underbrush behind me. Every instinct told me to keep moving, but I was running out of strength and time. I stumbled into another clearing, this one wider and eerily quiet. The moonlight bathed the space in an unnatural glow, and for a brief moment, I thought I might have a chance. Then I heard it, a deep, guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. The bear stepped into the clearing, its massive body casting a shadow that swallowed the light. Its dark eyes locked onto mine, and blinking and predatory. I froze, every fiber of my being telling me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I glanced around, searching for anything I could use as a weapon, but there was nothing. Just rocks, dirt, and the endless forest. My hands were still bound, the duct tape cutting into my skin. The bear took a step closer, then another. Its movements were slow, deliberate, as if it knew there was no need to rush. I backed away, my foot catching on a root. I fell again, my body hitting the ground with a thud. This was it. As the bear loomed over me, its breath hot against my face, my mind raced with regret and fear. How had it come to this? A simple drive home, a wrong turn, and now this. The bear roared, the sound shaking the very air around me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. In that moment, I stopped fighting. There was no escape. The last thing I saw was the glint of its teeth as it lunged forward, and then everything went dark. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. This will help me work better and faster for you. I would be grateful, so watch my other videos. Hello my dear viewers. Today will be a very interesting story. I recommend watching the video to the end. Put a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and be sure to write comments on what you liked or did not like, and if you have an interesting criminal story from your life. Write your story in the comments and I will make a video and tell your story here on the channel. Okay, I have detained you. I wish you a good mood and viewing. I never thought my life would take the turn it did. My name's Charlotte Hayes. I'm 36, a single mother to a 17-year-old boy named Ethan, and until a year ago, I thought I had everything under control. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? It all started on a Thursday evening at Café Loon, a cozy little spot in downtown Boston where I worked as a waitress. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and I loved the regulars who came in, each with their own quirks and stories. That's where I met him, Vince Delacroix. The first time I saw him, he was sitting at the far corner table, dressed in a crisp navy suit that looked like it cost more than my entire year's salary. He had this aura about him, confidence, power, and a hint of danger that made my heart race in a way I hadn't felt in years. "Can I get you anything else?" I'd asked, holding my pen nervously over my notepad. He glanced up, his deep green eyes locking with mine. "Just your name," he said smoothly, a faint smile playing on his lips. That was the beginning. Vince started coming to the cafe regularly, always sitting in the same spot, always asking for me to take his order. He was charming, attentive, and had this magnetic quality that drew me in like a moth to a flame. I knew there was something off. He was too polished, too secretive, but I ignored the warning bells. I hadn't dated anyone seriously since Ethan's dad walked out on us when he was a baby. I told myself it was time to let someone in, to take a chance. Vince made me feel seen, like I was more than just a struggling single mom trying to make ends meet. Ethan, on the other hand, wasn't thrilled when I told him about Vince. "Mom, you don't even know him," he said one night after I mentioned I had plans with Vince for dinner. "I know enough," I replied, feeling defensive, "and he makes me happy. That's all that matters, isn't it?" Ethan didn't argue, but I could tell he didn't trust Vince. Maybe it was just teenage stubbornness, or maybe he didn't like the idea of someone stepping into his dad's place. I brushed it off, too caught up in the whirlwind of my new romance to see the cracks forming around me. It wasn't until weeks later that I started noticing the little things about Vince, the way his phone was always buzzing, but he'd never answer in front of me. The vague answers he gave when I asked about his work. And then there was the night he picked me up in a car I could only describe as mobster chic, with tinted windows and an entourage of men who looked like they'd walked straight out of a gangster movie. "Who are they?" I'd asked nervously as we drove to the restaurant. "Business associates," he said with a shrug, his tone casual but his grip on the wheel tight. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that this man who made me laugh, who looked at me like I was the only woman in the world, was just another successful businessman with a few eccentricities. But deep down, I knew the truth was far darker than I wanted to admit. It was a chilly Friday evening when Vince invited me to his estate for the first time. Estate might be an understatement. It was more like a fortress. The sprawling mansion sat at the end of a long, tree-lined driveway, surrounded by high walls and guarded by men who looked like they hadn't smiled in years, while I whispered as he led me inside. The interior was a stunning mix of modern luxury and old-world charm, with marble floors, ornate chandeliers, and walls lined with priceless art. "Like it?" Vince asked, his hand resting lightly on my back. "It's overwhelming," I admitted, my voice tinged with awe and unease. "Get used to it," he said with a wink. "This is your life now." I laughed nervously, but his words lingered in my mind. Your life now. I wasn't sure if he meant it as a promise or a warning. As the weeks passed, I began to see more of Vince's world, and it terrified me. I couldn't ignore the phone calls he took behind closed doors, the late-night meetings with men whose faces were hardened by years of violence. I'd catch snippets of conversations, words like shipment, territory, and cleanup that made my stomach churn. One evening, while Vince was out, I decided to snoop. It wasn't something I was proud of, but my gut was screaming that something was wrong. I found a locked drawer in his study, and after searching his desk, I discovered the key. Inside were files, photographs, and maps. One file caught my eye. It had the name of a local shipping company scrawled on the tab. I flipped it open to find lists of names, transaction amounts, and dates. My heart pounded as I realized I was looking at evidence of smuggling operations, money laundering, and even murders. I slammed the drawer shut and hurried back to the living room, my hands trembling. When Vince returned, he noticed my unease immediately. "Something wrong, Charlotte?" he asked, his voice calm but his eyes sharp. "No," I lied, forcing a smile, "just tired." He didn't press, but I could feel his gaze lingering on me longer than usual. Things came to a head 2 weeks later when Ethan came home one evening with a black eye and a split lip. "What happened?" I demanded, rushing to his side. "It's nothing," he muttered, brushing me off. "It's not nothing," I insisted. "Who did this to you?" Ethan hesitated, then sighed. "Mom, I need to tell you something, but you have to promise not to freak out." I sat down, bracing myself. "Okay, I promise." "I've been working with this group," he began, his voice low. "We're trying to expose criminal organizations in the city, bring them down from the inside, and Vince is one of our targets." The room spun. "What are you talking about?" "Mom, Vince is a crime lord," Ethan said bluntly. "He runs one of the biggest mafia operations in the city. Drugs, weapons, human trafficking, you name it. He's involved." I shook my head, refusing to believe it. "No, that's not true. Vince isn't like that. He's dangerous, Mom," Ethan interrupted. "You have to get away from him. If he finds out what I'm doing, he won't think twice about coming after me or you." Tears filled my eyes as the weight of Ethan's words sank in. The man I'd fallen for wasn't just a businessman with a mysterious side. He was a monster. That night, I lay awake, torn between my feelings for Vince and the desperate need to protect my son. By morning, I knew there was no way this could end well. After Ethan's revelation, I felt like I was walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers. Every moment with Vince felt like a lie, every glance from him a potential threat, but I couldn't let him see my fear. If he suspected that Ethan or I knew the truth, I didn't even want to imagine what he might do. Ethan begged me to leave Vince immediately. "We'll go somewhere far away," he said. "Change our names, disappear. He'll never find us." But I knew it wasn't that simple. Vince had connections everywhere. Running wouldn't guarantee safety. And if I left abruptly, it might raise suspicions, putting us in even greater danger. For now, I had to stay. I had to pretend. That evening, Vince surprised me with a weekend getaway plan. "Pack your bags," he said, his voice full of excitement. "I've got something special lined up for us." "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to sound thrilled. "It's a surprise," he replied with a wink. "You'll love it." As I packed my things, my heart raced. I didn't trust this trip, but I couldn't refuse. If I acted differently, if I slipped up, it could all be over. Ethan was furious when I told him. "You can't go with him, Mom. What if he's setting you up?" I squeezed his hand, trying to reassure him. "I'll be careful, Ethan, I promise." Before I left, Ethan slipped a small recording device into my purse, just in case, he said. If he says anything incriminating, we can use it to bring him down. The trip was to a secluded cabin in the mountains, miles away from any signs of civilization. The view was breathtaking, snow-capped peaks, endless forests, but I couldn't enjoy it. The isolation made my skin crawl. Over dinner, Vince was his usual charming self, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was testing me. His questions felt pointed, his smiles a little too knowing. "You've been quiet lately," he said, pouring me a glass of wine. "Everything okay?" Of course, I lied, forcing a smile. "Just a lot on my mind." He murmured, studying me. "You know, Charlotte, trust is everything in a relationship. Without it, there's no foundation." The words felt like a blade against my neck. "I trust you," I said quickly, "completely." He leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Good. Because I'd hate to find out you were keeping secrets from me." That night, as Vince slept, I turned on the recorder and placed it near his phone, hoping to catch something useful. I knew it was risky, but it was the only way to gather evidence without drawing suspicion. The next morning, Vince announced we'd be heading back to the city earlier than planned. "Something's come up with work," he explained. My stomach sank. I knew that couldn't be good. When we returned, I hurried to Ethan's room, handing him the recorder. "Check this," I whispered. "I don't know if it caught anything, but it's all we've got." Ethan plugged it into his laptop and began playing the audio. At first, it was just background noise, muffled footsteps, the sound of the fireplace crackling. But then we heard Vince's voice. "The kid's name is Ethan Hayes. He's been digging where he shouldn't. Make sure he understands what happens when people cross me." My blood turned to ice. "Mom," Ethan whispered, his face pale. He knows it's me." Panic set in as I realized Vince wasn't just suspicious, he was preparing to act. "We have to do something," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "We have to stop him before it's too late." But what could we do against someone like Vince? I didn't have an answer. I didn't sleep that night. Vince knew about Ethan, and I had no idea how much time we had before he made his move. The walls of my world felt like they were closing in, and I could hardly breathe. By morning, I had decided on a plan, though calling it a plan might have been a stretch. I would confront Vince, distract him, and give Ethan enough time to disappear. It was risky, but it was the only chance we had. "You're quiet again," Vince said as we had breakfast. His voice was calm, but his eyes held that unnerving sharpness I'd come to fear. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" "Of course," I replied, forcing a smile. "I'm just tired." "I think there's more to it than that," he said, his tone darkening. He leaned forward, his piercing gaze locking onto mine. "You wouldn't lie to me, would you, Charlotte?" "No," I said quickly, my heart pounding. "Why would you even think that?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. "Loyalty is everything to me," he said quietly. "When people betray me, well, let's just say I make sure they regret it." I felt the blood drain from my face. He wasn't just talking, he was warning me. That afternoon, I pretended everything was fine, playing the role of the loving girlfriend while secretly texting Ethan. "Me, he knows. You need to get out of the city. Now, Ethan. Not without you." "Me, Ethan, please don't argue. Just go." "Ethan, I have a better idea." I'll meet you at the cafe tonight. We'll figure this out together. I didn't want to meet him, but I knew arguing would waste time we didn't have. So I agreed. When I told Vince I needed to run an errand, he didn't question it. But as I left the apartment, I had the sinking feeling that someone was watching me. At the cafe, Ethan was waiting in our usual booth, his face set with determination. "I have something," he said, sliding a USB drive across the table. "It's everything I've gathered on Vince. Evidence of his operations, his meetings, his crimes. If we get this to the FBI, they can take him down." "That's great," I said, though my voice wavered. "But how do we stay alive long enough to do that?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I have a contact, a federal agent. I'll get this to him tonight." I shook my head. "It's too dangerous." "Let me do it." "Mom, no," Ethan said firmly. "This is my fight. You shouldn't even be involved." Before I could argue, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Vince. "Vince, come home now." My chest tightened. He knew. "We need to leave," I whispered, grabbing Ethan's hand. Now, but as we stepped outside, the black SUV screeched to a stop in front of the cafe. Men in suits poured out, guns drawn. "Run!" I screamed, shoving Ethan toward the alley. We sprinted down the narrow passage, dodging crates and trash bins. Behind us, I could hear the heavy footsteps of Vince's men. Ethan reached the end of the alley first, but as I followed, a hand clamped down on my arm. I turned to see one of Vince's enforcers, his face cold and expressionless. "Charlotte," he said, "Boss wants to see you." I struggled, kicking and thrashing, but it was no use. Ethan's voice echoed behind me as I was dragged toward one of the SUVs. "Mom, go." "Ethan," I shouted. "Get out of here." I only prayed he listened. They shoved me into the SUV, the door slamming shut with a finality that echoed in my chest. I could still hear Ethan's voice calling my name as the car sped away. I prayed he had gotten away, that he'd listen to me and disappear. The drive back to Vince's estate was suffocatingly silent, the only sound the hum of the engine and the occasional click of a radio from the driver. My heart pounded so loudly it felt like it might burst from my chest. When we arrived, Vince was waiting in the grand foyer. He looked calm, too calm, that scared me more than if he'd been yelling. "Charlotte," he said, his voice smooth as silk, "come here." I stepped forward hesitantly, my legs trembling. "Vince, he held up a hand to silence me. "Do you think I'm a fool?" he asked, his tone deceptively soft. "No, of course not," I stammered. "Then why," he continued, taking slow, deliberate steps toward me, "have you and your son been playing games behind my back?" My stomach dropped. He knew everything. "Vince, please," I began, my voice breaking. "Ethan's just a kid. He doesn't understand." "Oh, he understands perfectly," Vince interrupted, his calm veneer cracking. "He's been working with the feds. Do you have any idea what that could do to me? To everything I've built?" I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "I didn't know. I swear. Please, let him go. He's just trying to protect me." "Protect you?" Vince laughed bitterly. "The irony, Charlotte, is that I was protecting you. I trusted you, and you betrayed me." He motioned to one of his men, who handed him a tablet. Vince tapped the screen, and a live feed appeared. My heart stopped when I saw Ethan on the screen, cornered in a warehouse, surrounded by Vince's men. "No," I screamed, rushing toward him, but two of his guards held me back. "Your son has been very busy," Vince said, his voice cold, "but I'll give you a choice." I froze, my breath hitching. "Your son's life," he said slowly, "or yours." The words hit me like a freight train. "You don't have to do this," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Please, Vince, let him go. I'll do whatever you want." "I already told you the terms," he said, his expression unreadable. "Choose, Charlotte." The room spun as the weight of the decision pressed down on me. My mind raced, searching for a way out, but there was none. I thought of Ethan, his laugh, his stubbornness, the way he always stood up for what was right. He was my son, my everything. I couldn't let him die because of my mistakes. "Take me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Vince raised an eyebrow, his expression softening for just a moment. "Are you sure?" I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I'm sure." He sighed, almost as if he regretted what he had to do. "You always had a strong heart, Charlotte," he said quietly. "It's a shame it had to end this way." The last thing I saw was Vince nodding to one of his men before the world went black. Some say you see your life flash before your eyes when it ends, but all I saw was Ethan. I hoped my sacrifice was enough to save him, enough to give him a chance to live. When the news broke weeks later about the takedown of a major crime syndicate led by a brave young whistleblower, I wasn't there to see it. But I didn't need to be. Ethan had done what I couldn't. He brought down the monster I'd once loved, and in doing so, he honored the only thing that had ever mattered to me: family. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. This will help me work better and faster for you. I would be grateful, so watch my other videos.